Hello students, welcome to IAS by Heart. Welcome to the Prelims High series. This is session 2020. I hope you have been regularly following these sessions. In this session, we'll be discussing the 10 important, most probable topics where UPSC can frame questions for 2021 prelims. So without any further delay, let's get into today's video. Let's look at the first question of the day. This question is from Polity. Consider the following statement regarding the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, PVTGs. We have been looking at them in the newspaper recurrently for the last 1 year. So that's why I've framed this question. Ministry of Tribal Affairs characterizes a tribe as a particularly vulnerable tribal group. Highest number of PVTGs are located in Madhya Pradesh. Which of the following statements are correct? I'll give you a few seconds to answer this question. Just remember what we have studied in polity. Just check if this ministry is correct and if this state is what is correct. Are there higher number of tribal groups in this state? If there are more number of tribal groups, then there'll be more number of PVTGs. So just think about these two options and choose the correct answer. So the correct answer is both the statements are wrong, because I'll tell you, because it is not Ministry of Tribal Affairs, but Ministry of Home Affairs that declares or categorizes a tribal group into a particularly vulnerable tribal group. Now there are these PVTGs, they reside in 18 states and one union territory, which is Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Ministry of Tribal Affairs, they implement the scheme for the development of PVTGs. So the categorization is done by Ministry of Home Affairs, and the implementation of schemes is done by Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Okay, PVTGs are more vulnerable, as the name suggests. They are more vulnerable due to this factor. More developed and assertive tribal groups take a major chunk of the tribal development fund, because of which PVTGs need more funds directed for their development, because they form very minuscule of the population, but they need more resources, be it financial resources or attention of the government, etc. They need more funds. Therefore, they have to be given special attention. In this context, in 1975, government initiated to identify the most vulnerable groups and formed a separate group called as PVTGs. This happened in 75 and declared 52 such groups. And then in 1993, additional 23 groups were added, making the total number as 75 PVTGs. Totally, in scheduled tribes, there are almost 705 groups. Out of the 705, 75 are very vulnerable, particularly vulnerable tribal groups. They are spread over 17 to 18 states and one union territory in the country. So here, this is the list of them. As you can see, there are 75 PVTGs. Among the 75, the highest number is found in Odisha. As you can see, there are 13 PVTGs here, followed by Andhra Pradesh. It has 12. The lowest number is found in Rajasthan, where only one PVTGs are there, followed by Manipur. Rajasthan and Manipur both have only one, and then Karnataka has 2. So this is the breakup. Okay, let's move on to the next one. What is the criteria for determination of PVTGs? They follow 4 criteria. Though this is not the hard and fast rule, this is predominantly what is considered before declaring a group as PVTG. Pre-agriculture level of technology, that is, they do not have much technology awareness, stagnant or declining population, extremely low literacy rate, subsistence level of economy, meaning what they produce, they consume in the economy, and there is not much surplus to go out of the economy. So these are the 4 major categories or criteria. Let's move on to the next question. This question is from economy. The term smurfing is related to which of the following? Ransomware, money laundering, round tripping, cyber attack. I'll give you a few seconds to answer this question. This term, it not only appeared in newspapers, but also this is mentioned in Ramesh Singh economy book. So the correct answer is is related to money laundering. Let's see what it is. Smurfing is also called as structuring. It is actually a method in which small sizes of money is kept in several number of bank accounts. If you keep 1 crore in one account, then you are liable to get the attention of the enforcement directorate, the bank officials, etc. How about you split into 10 accounts of 10 lakhs? Then what will happen? So that is what is called as smurfing, splitting up of a larger amount in a bank into various bank accounts to hide the real identity of the owner, of the real owner. So this has been very commonly used method of money laundering during the reform period. As more prudential norms of banking regulation evolved, such acts declined in India. So though it is declined, it still is prevalent. Smurfer or money mule is a person who does this. Okay, just get familiar with this term. There are various forms of money laundering. For example, bulk cash smuggling, that is, it is physically smuggled cash to faraway places like offshore bank accounts who do not have money laundering checks in place. For example, the Cayman Islands, Mauritius, etc. These are havens for money laundering. Cash intensive business, to sneak an illicit money along with legitimate money earned into their account books so that they can mix up and show that this black money is also brought into account. For example, parking structures, strip clubs, restaurants, car wash, bars, casinos, etc. The here money is involved in a large sum. So even if you say that this much money I made in this business, it cannot be checked out. For example, one cannot check in how many car came for car washes, etc. So this is very much prone for laundering of money. Trade-based laundering, it involves under and overvaluing of invoices for concealing the movement of money. And then shell companies, we have learned about it to disguise the true owners. And then round tripping of money, that is, money is transferred to offshore accounts with minimal records and then transferred back as investment, and thus evades taxation. If somebody is investing from other country, then we cannot tax on it. We can only tax on the profits, not the investments. So that is one way to do it. Gambling, small bets with large returns and negligible losses. Therefore, money is recorded as gamble wins. If you say that I won 1 crore in a lottery, then surely that money could be accounted for. Black salary, like unregistered employees with written contracts whom salaries are paid using illicit money. And tax amenities, like cash and assets and tax havens, place where there are very low taxes. Like if you want to buy a property, if you buy in India, it has a whole different scenario of taxation. If you buy a land or a place in Mauritius or in islands in the Pacific Ocean, here their taxes are very less, so one can account it for. Transaction laundering, that is, a merchant unknowingly processes illicit money for other businesses, that is transaction laundering. So these are some of the forms of money laundering. Let's move on to the next question. The next question, it is from international relations. Third question: according to IMF's geographical division of the world, which of the following countries are part of South Asia? Each organization has its own geographical division. So according to International Monetary Fund, what are the countries that constitute South Asia? There are a few options given: India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and Maldives. Select the correct answer using the code below. I'll give you a few seconds to answer this question. Before looking at the correct answer, the thing is, many of us would have thought or doubted Maldives because it is an island nation. Maybe it is not included in South Asia, etc. But surprisingly, the correct answer is 1, 4, and 5 only. According to IMF, Pakistan and Afghanistan do not form a part of South Asia. Led by India, South Asia is moving towards becoming the center for global growth and could contribute about 1/3 of the world's growth by 2040. This is a very important finding that you can quote in your mains answer, according to a latest research by IMF. Notably, under IMF's geographical division, South Asia does not include Afghanistan and Pakistan. It is deliberately left out. These two countries do not constitute South Asia according to IMF. So, according to IMF, South Asia includes India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and Maldives. Afghanistan and Pakistan are left out of it. Moving on to the fourth question, Global Social Mobility Index is released by which of the following international organization? Try and answer this question. See if this report or this index is familiar to you. The correct answer is World Economic Forum. India has been ranked very low at 76 out of 82 on social mobility index compiled by WEF. It is topped by Denmark. This is released ahead of 50th annual meeting of WEF. India is among the 5 countries that stand to gain the most from better social mobility. That is, if we have better social mobility, like the amount or the facilities or the perks that was enjoyed by the father and his son, how much has it been a drastic difference? That is what is social mobility. It seeks to measure parameters necessary for creating societies where every person has the same opportunity to fulfill his potential in life, irrespective of socioeconomic background. That is how much opportunity a person has, irrespective of what his economic status is, financial status is, socioeconomic status is, etc. What is social mobility? It is the movement in personal circumstances, their upwards or downwards trend of an individual in relation to that of his parents. How fast their parents started earning. For example, if their salary was 10,000 initially, and then how long it took for them to reach to 50,000, and how long it takes, what is the initial salary of his son? How long does it take for him to reach the 50,000 mark? For example, I'm just saying for an example. So that is what is social mobility. It is the ability of a child to experience a better life than his parents. That is what is social mobility. On the other hand, relative social mobility is assessment of the impact of socioeconomic background on individual outcomes. Like, for example, if you have a very rich parents, then you'll be enrolled in a very different school, you'll have a very different quality of education, etc. In India, this is the scenario. People who are enrolling in different schools get different quality of education. Unfortunately, that is the scenario. So that is measured using relative social mobility. It can be measured against a number of outcomes ranging from health to educational achievement and income. Moving on to the next question, question number 5 from Environment and Geography. Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures is sometimes seen in news. It is related to which of the following? Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. This task force belongs to which of these organizations or initiatives? Let's look at the correct answer now. Correct answer is UNEP Finance Initiative. Okay. What is this TCFD? It is actually a private sector-led initiative set up in 2015 by Financial Stability Board. The aim of this is to develop a voluntary, consistent, climate-related financial risk disclosure. This can be used by who? By companies, banks, investors, providing information to stakeholders. So the aim of this initiative is to make sure that how much climate can affect the financial sector. It aims to develop a set of voluntary, consistent disclosure recommendations for use by companies by providing information to investor, lender, insurance underwriters, climate-related financial risk. So this is to this acknowledges that climate has become a very big factor that we cannot ignore, that it has even the power to influence our financial decisions. It seeks to support appropriate risk pricing and capital allocation and to identify, assess, and manage financial risks and opportunities from climate change to improve the financial valuation. For example, if a place has high proximity to earthquake or flood or some kind of natural disaster, then the value of the land in that place will be surely decreased. If we start building earthquake proof buildings or earthquake resistance infrastructure there, then the value of the land will increase. So this can be done how? By assessing the climate related risk to a place, thereby increasing the financial opportunities. UNEP Financial Initiative began a journey of convening TCFD pilot projects unique to banks, investor, and insurance in its membership. What is this UNEP FI? It is a partnership between UNEP and the global financial sector to mobilize private sector finance for sustainable development. The aim is to rope in more and more private sector into the sustainable development area. It works with more than 300 members. These members include various people from banks, insurers, investors, and supporting institutions to create a financial sector that serves people and planet while delivering positive impacts. It aims to inspire, inform, and enable financial institutions to improve people's quality of life without compromising the future generation. By leveraging the UN role, it accelerates sustainable finance. This is a new term, sustainable finance. It hosts global roundtable every other year and has done so since 1994. Let's move on to the next one. UNEP, Statement of Commitment by Financial Institution on Sustainable Development, represent the backbone. It also supports sustainable stock exchange initiatives. So the aim of this is to sustainable everything, to support everything that has focus on sustainable development in financial sector. It was launched in 2012 with UNCTAD, UN Global Compact, and the PRI. Today it involves 90 stock exchange, almost all publicly listed capital markets. It is also a founding member of UN Sustainable Stock Exchange, along with PRI, which is Principle for Responsible Investment, United Nations Conference, UNCTAD, and UN Global Compact. So this is just a quick overview of what it is. If it is asked in some of the options in prelims question, you should be able to eliminate at least a few facts. Moving on to question number 6. Consider the following statements regarding microdot technology. This has been recently in news. It is a new technology. It involves spraying of thousands of nano dots carrying registration information on vehicles. The microdots are adhesive and become permanent fixtures which cannot be removed without damaging the asset. So this is a very new technology. It involves spraying nano dots on the vehicles, on vehicle engines, chauffeur, etc. So that if one has to find out the engine, if it is stolen from somewhere, you can easily find out this engine belongs to which company, which product, it was brought by whom, etc. So which of the statements are correct? Both the statements seem to be correct. So the correct answer is C. It involves spraying thousands of nano dots, which is usually not visible to naked eye. This carry information like registration number, the chassis number of the vehicle, etc. Just sprayed in different spots of the vehicle so that if the vehicle is stolen or sold for parts, it can be traced, like where it was sold, what is the information of the vehicle, etc. These are adhesive and become permanent fixtures which cannot be removed without damaging which the vehicle itself. So this is not visible to naked eye. Moving on to the 7th question from social issues. What is the minimum number of employees required for the application of provisions of Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provision Act of 1952? Like how big should an organization be to apply this act? How much number of employees you think should be there? So the correct answer is 20. The provisions of Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provision Act of 1952 is applicable on every establishment employing 20 or more persons. If an office contains 20 or more persons, then they are entitled, the employer should surely give the Provident Fund benefits to the employees specified in Schedule 1 of the Act and any other activity notified by the central government. This Act, that is 1952 Act, provides for the institution of Provident Fund for employees in factories and other establishments. This is just a quick information to you. There should be at least 20 employees in an organization for this Provident Fund Act. Moving on to the next question, consider the following statements regarding INTAC, which is Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage. Founded in 1984 with a vision to spearhead heritage awareness and conservation in India. This statement looks harmless. It is an autonomous body under Ministry of Culture. So just weigh in the two statements and arrive at a correct answer. Which of the above statements are not correct? Let's look at the correct answer. 2 only. So INTAC was found in 1984 with a vision to spearhead heritage awareness and conservation in India, because India is highly rich in culture and heritage. It is recognized as one of the world's largest heritage organization, about 190 chapters across the country. It has pioneered in conservation and preservation of not just natural and built heritage, but intangible heritage, that is, which cannot be seen, can only be felt. Headquartered in New Delhi, it operates through various divisions such as architectural heritage, natural heritage, material, intangible cultural heritage, and then heritage communication services, along with education, crafts and community cell, chapters, intact heritage academy, tourism, listing cell, library, archives, documentation center, etc. So before moving on to the next question, this is not an autonomous body, but rather it is a non-profit charitable organization. It is actually registered under the Societies Registration Act of 1980. So that's why the second statement is correct. Incorrect, sorry. So moving on to the ninth question, which of the following scheme or schemes are central sector scheme for agriculture? So you have to know, are these the schemes of agriculture, and then you have to know which is the central sector scheme. Formation and promotion of farmer producing organization, Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, which is an insurance scheme, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi, that is PM Kisan. Which of these schemes are central sector scheme? Let's look at the correct answer. The correct answer is 1 and 3 only, because the second one, that is the insurance scheme, it is actually centrally sponsored scheme. We'll look at the difference now. PM Kisan, it is actually a central sector scheme. It provides income support to all small and marginal landholding farmer families having cultivable land. Fasal Bima Yojana, it is a centrally sponsored scheme and replaced all other existing insurance scheme except the restructure weather-based crop insurance scheme. These are just information for you to revise. Formation and promotion of farmer producer organization is a central sector scheme under Department of Agriculture. So what is a centrally sponsored scheme? It is different from central sector scheme in the sense that central sector schemes are implemented by the center directly. So this is implemented directly, whereas in central sponsored scheme, it is implemented by the states. That is one difference. Central sector schemes are extended by the union government to states under Article 282. It mainly covers items related in the state list, which is centrally sponsored schemes. It mainly covers items in the state list. Central sector schemes are entirely and directly funded and executed. So both funding and execution done by the central government itself. These schemes are formulated by the center based on the subjects from union list. So centrally sponsored scheme is from state list. Central sector scheme is from union list. Besides, there are other programs that various central ministries implements directly in the states and UTs, which also comes under central sector schemes. These are financial resources which are not shifted to states, but rather implemented by the central government directly. Okay, so just know the difference about this. In these questions, I'll be touching the topics where you have to know something about the topic. It will not be possible for us to cover the topic entirely. So I'll be just giving you an overview or gist of it. You have to have a holistic understanding about these topics. Okay. Now moving on to the last question of the day with reference to electoral bond scheme. This has been recurrently coming up in the newspaper. So I just wanted to add this question. It is an interest-free bond announced in the Union Budget of 2017. State Bank of India is the only bank authorized to sell them. Political party can cash through its verified account within 30 days. If the electoral bond does not cash within the limit, then it deposits to the PM Relief Fund. Which of these statements are correct? Let's look at the correct answer. The correct answer is 1, 2, and 4 only. Statement 1 is correct. Why? Because it was, yes, it was announced in 2017 Union Budget. Electoral bonds are interest-free bearer instrument. That is, to whom the bond is taken, he has to bear it. Used to donate money anonymously to political parties. So here the keyword is anonymously. That's why this has been scrutinized in the newspaper by many people. Like it could be misused, etc. State Bank of India is the only bank that is authorized to sell the bonds. It is sold in the multiples of thousand, like 1,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakh, and 1 crore. Statement 3 is incorrect. Why? Because donors can purchase and subsequently donate the bonds to their party of choice, which the party can cash through the verify account within 15 days only. Here, the window has been, it is reduced not to a month, but only a half a month. SBI deposit the bonds that the political party hasn't encashed within 15 days into the Prime Minister's Relief Fund. You can find more about this in this link. I've given link in this. Kindly check it out. So a quick recap of what we saw in this. PVTGs, who are PVTGs and how many states they reside in which union territory they are in, etc. And then what are the criteria to designate a particular group as PVTGs? Of the 705 scheduled tribes, we have only 75 of them as PVTGs. What is smurfing? That is money laundering. What are the other money laundering related terms, etc.? What is the geographical division of South Asia? What are the countries that are not included, which is Pakistan and Afghanistan? Global Social Mobility Index released by who? What is social mobility, etc. We saw. Task Force on Climate Related Financial Disclosures by UNEP Financial Initiative. And then micro dot technology, what it is and how can it prevent stealing of vehicles, selling of vehicle parts in the black market, etc. And then we talk about intact. I mean, how much employees should be there in an organization to be compliant with the issuing of provident fund, etc. And then we talked about intact, and then central sector schemes and centrally sponsored scheme. What is the difference between them? Which implements which schemes, etc. And then electoral bond scheme, what it is and how it has been misused, etc. These are the overall topics about which there could be questions in UPSC. I would suggest you to just have a an in-depth knowledge, at least an overview where you can eliminate few options from this. Okay, so that's all for this session. If there are any questions, kindly leave it in the comment box. We'll be happy to clear your doubts. Stay tuned for upcoming classes. Thank you.